What if death was never the end, but a threshold? And beyond it, a shadow waited, with the head of a jackal. The Egyptians believed this shadow had a name, Anubis. Not a god of temples or thrones, but of silence, of the tomb, of the heart. They said he watched every burial. His black form pacing the desert, his ears pricked for the faintest whisper of a departing soul. They said no one entered the underworld without passing before his eyes. He was not judge, not executioner, but something older, something more necessary. In the hall of Ma'at, he weighed the heart of the dead against a single feather. A heart heavy with sin would sink, and the soul would be fed to Ammit the devourer. A heart light with truth would rise, and the soul would walk free into the fields of reeds. But here lies the terror. What if Anubis was not a myth? What if his rituals were not symbols, but memories of something mankind once saw? Archaeologists have uncovered catacombs of mummified jackals offered by the thousands to him, their bodies preserved in dark, endless corridors. Why? Because the Egyptians feared not decay, but being forgotten, being lost without his guidance. So ask yourself, when your heart stops beating, when silence spreads through your veins, who will weigh it? And what waits if it is found wanting? Long before Osiris ruled the underworld, it was Anubis who walked between the living and the dead. In the earliest tombs carved into desert cliffs, his jackal form was already there, painted in ochre, etched into limestone black against the sand. He was called Inpu, the opener of the ways, a guide, a guardian, a watcher in the dark. The Egyptians knew the desert jackal well. At night they saw it circle the graves of the unburied, its eyes glinting in moonlight, its cry breaking the silence. They did not fear it, they transformed it. They gave the scavenger divinity, and in doing so, they gave themselves hope. For if Anubis guarded the tomb, then the body would not be defiled, and the soul would not be lost. He became more than a guardian. He became the embalmer. Priests who wrapped the bodies of kings wore jackal masks, whispering invocations, as resin and linen sealed flesh from decay. To touch the dead was dangerous, forbidden, but in the mask of Anubis, it became sacred.
Listen,
the priest was not a man anymore. He was the god himself, preserving the vessel, so the soul might endure. And then came the most haunting image of all, the weighing of the heart. In the Book of the Dead, painted on papyrus and tomb walls, Anubis stands before the great scales. On one side, the heart of the dead seat of memory, conscience, desire. On the other, a feather white and weightless, the symbol of Ma'at, goddess of truth. If the heart balanced, the soul was led by Anubis into eternity. If it sank heavy with lies, Anubis stepped aside, and the beast Ammit devoured it. The punishment was not fire nor torment, it was annihilation, to be erased forever. This was the terror that shaped Egyptian life. Every act, every word, every thought would one day be weighed. Kings and peasants alike faced the same scales. And always in every image, the black jackal waits his hand, steady on the balance. Even as Osiris rose to power in myth, Anubis never vanished. He became his son, his servant, his guardian, but always he remained at the threshold. Egyptians whispered his name in funerary prayers, carved his form into amulets worn on the chest of the dead. To walk alone into the afterlife was unthinkable. Only with Anubis could the path be found. 5,000 years have passed, yet his shadow lingers. His statues still stand at the entrances of tombs, tall, silent ears erect as if listening. His eyes, black as obsidian, still follow us. And perhaps the fear remains too, that when the last breath leaves our body, it will not be silence that greets us, but the jackal-headed god weighing what we thought we had hidden. Anubis may have worn the head of a jackal, but he was not alone. Across the world, in cultures that never touched the Nile, the same figure appears, different faces, same duty. Always the guide, always the guardian. In Greece, the dead were not left to wander. They were met by Hermes Psychopompos, the messenger god who set aside his winged sandals to walk silently among tombs. Hermes did not judge. He simply led the soul to the river. There the ferryman Charon waited. His skiff scraped across the waters of Styx, but only if the dead had paid their claim. Without it, the soul drifted restless, trapped between worlds. The echo of Anubis is clear. Without a guide, eternity becomes exile. Far to the west, the Aztecs told of Xolotl, a dog-headed deity who accompanied the dead through 9 perilous levels of the underworld Mictlan. The dead were often buried with dogs, their companions in life, becoming companions in death. The Egyptians too mummified jackals and dogs, sealing them in tombs as offerings to Anubis. 2 civilizations, oceans apart, saw the same truth. Only the canine with its nose in both worlds could lead us home. In India, it was Yama, the first mortal to die, who became lord of the underworld. He rode a black buffalo, his eyes blazing red, and sent hounds to fetch the souls of the dead. To face Yama was to face inevitability, just as the Egyptians bowed before Anubis, knowing no man could escape the scales. And in the north, the Norse whispered of Hel, daughter of Loki, whose half-rotted face greeted the dead. She ruled the cold realm beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, where souls not slain in battle drifted. Though her visage was different, her role was the same: to receive, to contain, to bind death within order. These parallels are not coincidence. They are echoes. They suggest that mankind, from the Andes to the Ganges, from the Nile to the fjords, carried the same fear that death was a wilderness, and without a guide, the soul would be lost forever. Perhaps this is why psychopomps are almost never kings or warriors. They are liminal figures straddling boundaries. Jackals who haunt the desert's edge, dogs who move between village, and wild ferrymen who drift between shores. Messengers who cross from Olympus to the grave. They do not rule, they lead. They do not conquer, they accompany. And this is the haunting thought. If every civilization dreamed of such a guide, was it only imagination or memory? What if long ago mankind truly saw something waiting at the threshold? What if the figure of Anubis, jackal, ferryman, hound, messenger, is the same being remembered differently by every tribe and tongue? If Anubis was only a myth, why do the sands of Egypt still speak his name? In 2011, archaeologists entered the necropolis of Saqqara and uncovered something astonishing: an entire catacomb filled with the remains of animals, most of them jackals
We are finally
and dogs.
here.
Thousands upon thousands,
incredible.
carefully mummified, wrapped in linen, their bones preserved in silence. These were not random sacrifices. They were offerings to Anubis, each one a prayer, that he might guide the dead safely through the gates of the afterlife. The very practice of mummification itself carries his shadow. The earliest embalming rituals date back over 5,000 years. Priests wore black masks shaped like jackals as they anointed the body with oils, packed it with natron salts, and bound it in linen. To watch them was to see Anubis himself at work. Even Herodotus, the Greek historian, recorded that these masked priests were the very image of the god. Tomb walls repeat the story endlessly. In the Valley of the Kings, in the tomb of Tutankhamun, golden shrines depict Anubis crouched like a sentinel, ears erect, eyes fixed on eternity. In the papyrus of Hunefer, one of the most famous versions of the Book of the Dead, the scene is unmistakable. Anubis leading the soul by the hand, standing steady as the heart is weighed on the scales. It is not metaphor, it is instruction. A manual for the dead, illustrated step by step. Even modern science cannot escape the pull of his image. Forensic studies of Egyptian mummies reveal extraordinary care linen, packed in precise layers, resins chosen for their antibacterial properties, flesh preserved against decay for millennia. This was not superstition, it was knowledge encoded in ritual. Knowledge that the body must endure if the soul was to survive. And at the center of it all always was Anubis. But here lies the puzzle. Why jackals? Why did the Egyptians, who saw lions as kings and hawks as divine, choose the scavenger of the desert, some scholars suggest? It was fear that the jackal who prowled the graves became transformed into their protector. Others whisper something darker, that the animal was not chosen but seen. That in the stillness of the desert night, in the shadow of pyramids, something jackal-headed was glimpsed by mortal eyes. Archaeology gives us bones and statues, papyrus and shrines. Yet beneath the artifacts lies a deeper suggestion that Anubis was not invented, but remembered, that his image was carved into stone because someone long ago believed they had truly walked with him. To the Egyptians, every detail of Anubis carried meaning. His image was not accidental. It was a language written in symbols that whispered truths too deep for words. First, the jackal. In the desert, jackals circled the graves of the unprotected, their cries piercing the night. They were scavengers feared for their hunger. And yet Egypt transformed fear into faith. The predator became protector. In Anubis, the devourer of flesh became the guardian of souls. It was a powerful inversion. What threatened the dead became the very force that defended them. Then the color black. Unlike the later image of the Grim Reaper, black was not decay. It was rebirth. The Nile after the floods left behind soil black and fertile, the earth of resurrection. Anubis's black skin was not a sign of rot, but of renewal, the promise that even in death, life could begin again. The scales he carried told another story. To weigh the heart against a feather was more than judgment, it was balance. The Egyptians believed that existence itself hung between order and chaos, truth and falsehood, Ma'at and Isfet. Anubis was the keeper of this balance. He did not punish, he measured. The scales were a mirror reflecting the weight of one's own actions. And what of the heart? Unlike later traditions that placed the soul in the mind, the Egyptians believed the heart contained everything: memory, morality, desire. To lose one's heart was to lose oneself. This is why it was preserved in mummification, placed back into the body, often with amulets shaped like scarabs to protect it. When Anubis weighed the heart, he was not measuring sin alone, he was measuring the essence of identity. Even his ears, upright and alert, carried meaning. They marked him as one who listens, who hears every prayer spoken at the edge of the tomb, every whisper of grief left in the sand. Anubis was not blind judgment. He was attentive silence. Together, these symbols painted a figure that was more than a god. Anubis was a philosophy carved in flesh, fear transformed into protection, decay into rebirth, silence into guidance, death into balance.
Each word
and perhaps this is
destiny.
why his image endured. Because Anubis was never only about the afterlife, he was about the living. He reminded them that every action leaves weight, that truth must be carried lightly, that even the darkest shadow can guard the way forward. What if Anubis was never meant to be only a god, but a mirror? Not a being to worship, but a truth to confront. The Egyptians did not believe the dead were judged by fire, nor tortured in eternal torment. Instead, they believed something far more haunting, that every soul carried the weight of its own life. The scales of Anubis were not punishment imposed from outside. They were reflection. What you had done, what you had spoken, what you had hidden in silence, all of it condensed into a single weight. No escape, no plea, only balance. This philosophy reaches far beyond Egypt. It suggests that the ultimate judge is not divine wrath, but the self. In the silence of death, stripped of masks, stripped of excuses, we face only the truth of our actions. Anubis, standing with the scales, embodies that moment of confrontation. He does not condemn. He does not absolve. He simply reveals. There is something profoundly human in this vision. To imagine a God who listens, who weighs but does not rule, this is to imagine death not as tyranny, but as clarity. It is a reminder that justice lies not in distant heavens, but within the heart we carry every day. Perhaps that is why his form endures. Because beneath the jackal's face lies a question older than pyramids. How heavy is your heart? And deeper still, what if Anubis represents not only death, but memory? To the Egyptians, the worst fate was not to be judged unworthy. It was to be forgotten, to wander without a name. Anubis guarded against that oblivion. His presence whispered, "You matter, your life will be weighed. Your story will not vanish into the sand." 5,000 years later, we still long for that assurance. We still fear that our deeds may sink us, or that our names may dissolve into silence. And so even in a secular world, we carry Anubis within us, not as a deity, but as an idea. The guardian of souls becomes the guardian of meaning itself. 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians placed their hope in the black jackal who waited at the threshold of death. They carved his image into gold, sealed his name into stone, and trusted him with their final breath. But Anubis is not alone. Across oceans and centuries, other faces appear. In India, Yama rides his buffalo, sending hounds to fetch the souls of men. In Mexico, La Santa Muerte waits in a veil of flowers and bones. In Greece, the ferryman Charon still demands his coin. Different names, different masks. And yet always the same figure waiting in silence, holding the line between life and what lies beyond. So the question lingers. If every culture remembers a guardian of souls, are we witnessing coincidence or memory? What if these figures are not inventions, but shadows of the same being glimpsed again and again as mankind stares into the dark? And if Anubis was only the first mask, then who still waits behind the others?